For 5 years, I had been married to a man who loved me unconditionally, a love I thought I reciprocated. Yet, somewhere along the way, cracks began to form in the foundation of our marriage, invisible to everyone but me. It was during one of those turbulent moments that he entered my life, a client with charm that was intoxicating and a charisma I couldn't resist. What started as innocent conversations quickly spiraled into something much darker. Each stolen moment, each secret meeting chipped away at my conscience until I was drowning in a sea of guilt. I knew what I was doing was wrong. My husband, younger and devoted, didn't deserve the betrayal. He trusted me, believed in us, and yet I let myself succumb to temptation. The guilt became unbearable sleepless nights, haunted thoughts, and the looming fear that he would find out. One evening, unable to endure the weight of my own deceit, I confessed. I told him everything, the man, the lies, the betrayal. Tears streamed down my face as I begged for forgiveness, fully aware that I might never receive it. In that moment, the look in his eyes of pain, disbelief, and devastation was a punishment far greater than anything I could have imagined. When I confessed my betrayal, I braced myself for anger, yelling, accusations, anything to release the storm of emotions I knew he must feel. But instead, my husband sat in silence, his face a blank canvas painted only with sadness. It was as if something inside him had shattered, leaving behind an emptiness that words could never fill. He didn't shout or lash out. He didn't even look at me with hatred. His quiet despair was far worse. Days turned into weeks, and he withdrew further into himself. The man who had once greeted me with warmth and unshakable devotion now barely met my gaze. His presence was cold, his voice distant, and the laughter that used to fill our home was replaced by a heavy silence. I tried everything to mend the broken pieces counseling sessions, heartfelt letters, romantic gestures, but nothing seemed to reach him. His responses were curt, his emotions buried beneath an impenetrable wall. It was as though the love we once shared had been extinguished, leaving only embers of resentment and sorrow. Watching him spiral into depression, knowing I had caused it, was a torment I couldn't escape. I had hoped forgiveness, but what I found was a hollow version of the man I had once known. As the weeks passed, his silence transformed into distance nights stretched longer, and his once predictable routines became a mystery. He started coming home late, his excuses vague and laced with indifference. "Work ran late," he'd say, or "I grabbed a drink with some colleagues." But the detached tone in his voice and the emptiness in his eyes spoke volumes that his words couldn't mask. My instinct screamed that something wasn't right, but I was too afraid to confront it, too consumed by the guilt of my own betrayal to demand answers. Then one evening, as I absentmindedly picked up his jacket from the couch, a faint but unmistakable scent of perfume lingered on the fabric. It wasn't mine. My heart sank and my chest tightened as the realization clawed its way into my mind. He was slipping away and I was powerless to stop it. I started noticing the small things, texts he would hide, a distant smile when his phone buzzed, and the unfamiliar number that seemed to call more frequently. Every discovery was a dagger to my already fragile heart. The irony was cruel. The pain I had inflicted on him now mirrored in my own anguish. I wanted to scream, cry, beg him to come back to me, but deep down I knew that the bond we had was already fractured beyond repair. One evening, the inevitable confrontation came. His expression was calm yet distant, as if the decision had been made long before the words escaped his lips. "I've met someone," he admitted, his voice void of anger but heavy with finality. My heart sank, the air in the room thick with the weight of his confession. He quickly added, "But that's not why I'm leaving." His words stung more than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about the other woman, it was about the erosion of trust, the breaking of something sacred that could no longer be pieced together. I pleaded, tears streaming down my face, begging him to reconsider. "We can fix this," I said desperately. "We can go to counseling, start over, anything." But he shook his head, the look in his eyes one of resignation, not cruelty. "This isn't something that can be fixed," he replied softly. too much has happened. I can't pretend to feel the same way anymore." Hearing those words broke me in ways I hadn't thought possible. Despite my efforts to atone for my betrayal, he was resolute. The divorce papers came days later, cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to the love we had once shared. My world collapsed entirely. The day he moved out felt like a slow, suffocating death. I watched in silence as he packed his belongings, each box a painful reminder of the life we had built together over 5 years. The sound of tape sealing the boxes echoed through the emptying rooms, a haunting soundtrack to the unraveling of our marriage. He didn't speak much, but when he finally looked at me, his gaze was devoid of warmth, replaced instead with a sadness that cut deeper than anger ever could. "I've thought this through," he said firmly. "The marriage ended the moment you broke our vows. I tried, but I can't unsee what you've done." His words left me hollow, each syllable another brick in the wall between us. He handed me a list cold, transactional outlining the terms of our divorce. "I'm not here to punish you," he added, "but I want what's fair. This is the only way for both of us to move forward." Despite his calm demeanor, his departure was anything but peaceful. Every slammed car door and fading footstep felt like the closing of a chapter I wasn't ready to end. The guilt of my betrayal lingered, but now it was accompanied by the devastating realization that this was truly the end. The relationship with my parents has always been one filled with tension, pain, and betrayal. From the very start, I felt like I didn't belong in my own family. My parents, especially my father, were more focused on presenting an image of perfection to the outside world than actually caring for me. They had no interest in my well-being, and the emotional neglect I faced was compounded by constant criticism. Every mistake, no matter how small, would result in harsh punishment, both physically and emotionally. It was like I was living in a world where I could never measure up to their expectations. The breaking point came when I was kicked out of the house. I'll never forget the gut-wrenching pain of being abandoned by the people who were supposed to love and protect me. They justified it as a form of discipline, claiming it was tough love meant to teach me responsibility. But in reality, it was their way of exerting control over me, of making me feel small and insignificant. I was forced to fend for myself, left to navigate life on the streets with nothing but the clothes on my back. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any wound I had ever known. Years passed, and I struggled to rebuild myself, to find some semblance of peace. I became successful against all odds, but the emotional scars from that time never really healed. Then, years later, my parents tried to rewrite history, taking credit for the success they never had a hand in. They tried to portray themselves as the heroes, the ones who shaped me into the person I had become. But I knew the truth. They had tried to break me, to make me feel worthless, and now they were reaping the rewards of my struggle. Their hypocrisy was infuriating, and I couldn't let them get away with it. The tension between me and my parents had always been palpable, but nothing prepared me for the utter shock of what happened at the family dinner. After years of surviving on my own, facing the cruel abandonment they had so callously imposed upon me, I had managed to build something for myself, a life, a career, and an identity independent of them. I thought I had left the past behind, but that night, everything came rushing back in a flood of anger and betrayal. My parents, who had once turned their backs on me, now sat proudly, flaunting my success as if they had been there for me every step of the way. They raised their glasses in celebration, showering me with empty praises, pretending as though they were my guiding lights. Their words dripped with pride, but it was a pride that felt suffocating. It wasn't the kind of support I had earned or deserved. It was a hollow attempt to bask in the glory of something they had never contributed to. As they spoke of my accomplishments, it quickly became apparent that they were taking full credit for my success. The same parents who had thrown me out of the house at my lowest, the same ones who had punished me relentlessly for any perceived flaw, were now claiming that their cruelty had been a form of tough love, a necessary measure to shape me into the person I had become. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They actually had the audacity to say that the suffering they had inflicted upon me was a part of some grand plan, that their actions, their abandonment, and their harshness had all been for my benefit. My chest tightened with rage as I listened to them lie so effortlessly, rewriting history to suit their narrative. That night, as I sat in the middle of that lavishly decorated hall, surrounded by faces that held no real significance to me, everything that had been buried deep within me for years suddenly exploded. My parents were proudly boasting about my success, painting a picture of themselves as the architects of my achievements, and I was suffocating under the weight of their lies. Their words felt like poison, dripping with false praise, as they clung to my success like parasites, all the while ignoring the real cost of what I'd been through to get here. I could feel the rage building up inside me, a fury I could no longer suppress. For so long, I had carried the scars of their neglect, the memories of being discarded as if I were nothing but a nuisance to them. I had been thrown out of the house when I was just a child, left to fend for myself, locked in basements for hours on end as punishment for things I could never have controlled. They had subjected me to cruel and degrading treatments. Yet now they were standing there, taking credit for everything I had worked for, claiming it was their discipline that had molded me into the person I had become. I couldn't take it anymore. The years of pent-up pain, the feeling of being worthless in their eyes, all the hurt and abandonment, they all came rushing to the surface in that one moment. My voice trembled with emotion as I stood up and confronted them, the words spilling out in a furious torrent. "You want to claim credit for my success?" I scoffed, my voice shaking with disbelief. "You think your cruel punishment, your constant mistreatment, is what made me who I am? You think kicking me out and locking me in a basement, starving me of love and comfort, was some kind of lesson in life?" I could see the shock in their eyes, the horror that my words were finally exposing the truth they had tried so desperately to bury. My parents' faces flushed with embarrassment as they tried to backpedal, to twist the narrative and play the victim. But I wasn't having it anymore. "You had no right to treat me like that," I continued, my voice growing louder, fiercer. "You think your cruelty made me strong? No. It broke me. It scarred me in ways you'll never understand." The room fell silent. The guests, who had once looked at my parents with admiration, were now staring at them with judgment, their expressions shifting from awe to disbelief. My parents stood there, caught in their own web of lies, their facade shattered in front of everyone. They were no longer the proud, perfect parents they had tried to portray. They were exposed for what they truly were: manipulative, controlling, and selfish. I didn't care about the embarrassment it caused them. They had caused me enough pain to last a lifetime, and now, for once, I had the chance to expose them for who they really were. For a brief moment, I thought I might feel relief, but all I could feel was a deep, aching sadness. I was done trying to gain their approval. I had fought for my own life, and no matter how much they tried to rewrite history, I would never forget the truth. After everything that had happened, the years of emotional abuse, the painful isolation, and the realization that my parents were more interested in maintaining their image than acknowledging the trauma they caused, I knew I had to sever ties with them completely. The years of their cruelty had left deep scars that could never be healed by empty words or hollow apologies. I couldn't continue to let them pretend they were anything other than the toxic, manipulative people they were. It was time to break free from the chains they had forged. But there was one person I couldn't abandon: my younger sister. She, too, had suffered at the hands of our parents, and I knew that she, like me, was desperately searching for a way out. Despite everything, I could see the pain in her eyes, the same pain that mirrored my own. She didn't deserve the life they had forced on her. So, while I cut off all contact with our parents, I made it my mission to be there for her, to show her a different kind of loved one that wasn't tainted by manipulation or cruelty. I gave her the opportunity I never had a chance at: a career. I helped her secure a job in a field she was passionate about, offering her the support she desperately needed to break free from the toxic grip of our family. The relief in her eyes when she realized there was a way out, that she didn't have to be bound by the past, was all the validation I needed. This story isn't just mine. It's a reflection of the cycle of abuse that many families perpetuate, often under the guise of discipline or love. It's a reminder that breaking free from such toxicity is necessary for healing, but it's never easy. Sometimes we have to let go of those who should have been our protectors in order to protect ourselves. And in doing so, we give others a chance to heal too.